Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions.
Contract, which was an airborne ranger contract. As soon as I finished basic training, infantry training, one station unit training, my company commander pulled me, and he was an old ring knocker. He's from West Point. Pulled me and said, I'd like you to go to OCS, which is Officer Candidate School, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, kind of cool, whatever. And so I did it. Didn't go to OCS. I basically became part of the training cadre right there for all the people coming through to be infantrymen. And really, I don't know how it happened. Why, but I became real symbiotic with that company commander, our XO sum. I was kind of given carte blanche. But toward the very end, that went on for about a year and some months, I pulled my packet right after my majors board. So I'd been going through these boards. You basically appear, answer questions, get dressed right, dressed. You're in your dress screens. And I told them that's not what I wanted to do, much to their dismay. And how had I arrived at that decision?
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, this is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that I had went there. By then, I already knew that I had went there to find something that I wasn't going to find. And that was in my own personal journey. I thought that would make me, help turn me into like this, some kind of badass guy that would garner some type of respect because you chose to do something harder. And really, I didn't necessarily see it there. I saw a system. And you got to realize how I grew up, Mike. I grew up, I had to cultivate my own autonomy. I had to be extremely self-sufficient, being by myself. And I was already self-disciplined. So that's why I'm the exact same way right here today as I am when I got out right before 1996.
Right.
And so I pulled that, which made me eligible for worldwide assignment. Then went to Fort Carson in Colorado. So that would have been early 90s. And then became a light infantry, a mechanized squad leader. We were mech there. And that was a time where Clinton decided, or the Department of Defense decided, that we were going to have a reduction in force.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you had was, is it Fort Devens, maybe? Maybe it's Fort Devens. You had 10th Special Forces Group up there, and they came to Fort Carson during that time. You had some dudes from Benning and 3rd Bat come over there, and then they started incorporating this LRSD unit at 4th ID.
Right.
And so we played around with that. There were some interesting people that were coming around on post. I had done some stuff in my expert infantry badge training, and then they made me cadre for that. Then I came up on orders, ended up going to Korea, and they extended me there. But the crazy thing was, some of those same guys that had been walking around at Fort Carson in regular clothes ended up in Korea. And this was at the first of the 503rd, kind of close to the DMZ. And so really what I did that whole last time, and honestly, if I wouldn't have had the backing, Mike, of some people way, way, way above me in my immediate command structure, I probably no telling what would have happened to me. I just always stayed squared away, made sure I was very competent in what I was supposed to do, but I was extremely non-conventional. And thank God, they're like, I guess he's good here, therefore he's an asset, but we know to keep him right here and ask him to perform in this way, he's a total pain in the ass, which I was.
Yeah.
So by the time I got to Korea, really what I did was I taught call for fire. And for my course, I set it way up on a mountain. It makes perfect sense. We were mortarmen. You get to see, you can call in assets better. And so I taught all the guys, soldiers coming in for the EIB testing there, taught them camouflage, taught the Marines that would come through the peninsula from time to time, and First Special Forces group, because they have to have a adequate knowledge within all their weapon systems, because at that time, their job purely was to go into different countries and train those indigenous peoples how to fortify their own armies and fight those wars.
Right.
And so you can't be an expert on everything. So I would teach those guys that. And then some of those same dudes gave me a chance to run ranges, really shooting. And that kind of morphed into a lot of offers to exchange that uniform. And at that time, I still hadn't completed my degree. I had some college credits, but it gave me an opportunity to go do stuff like shoot for HRT, DEA, bunch of alphabet soup, individual SWAT teams. And I thought about it. I'm like, but honestly, I didn't want to trade one uniform for another, even if it would have been a different type of uniform. By then I was like, I have an idea what I wanted to do. And I'll back up a little bit. When I was at Fort Carson, whereas, you've got all these infantry soldiers, what do they do when we're not training or in garrison, not deployed, whatever? They're whoring, they're getting tattoos, drinking copious amounts of anything they can put their hands on. You know what I did? I went and volunteered in an emergency room on the weekends and the evenings, overnight. And I figured, well, that's really applicable. It helps brush up on your skills and you're learning something new. And I wanted to be useful. I didn't feel like I was all that useful there. And so then while I was in Korea, I had already started taking some independent courses. I think Windows 94 had come out. So computers and all this was like a big deal. So there were a couple of civilian dudes teaching that in these damn Quonset huts. So I would take those classes. And because I had been in that hospital, I was like, all right, there's a sense of urgency here. So there's activity because the ER is a busy place. But this hospital's ginormous. So how does this business run? So I'd made the decision I was going to run hospitals. I had no idea what that entailed, but that was what was in my mind. And so I'd already applied to a school, Southwest Texas State University, as I was dwindling down in Korea, to be accepted there and go into that program. And they accepted me. And so when I wrapped up, I mean, I beat feet and that's where I was going.
So how long were you in the Army?
5 years.
Okay. So you do your 5 years. You leave the Army. You go to Southwestern State?
Southwest Texas State University.
Southwest Texas State.
It's now, yeah.
And you learn how to run hospitals.
I go there.
Why did you want to run hospitals?
I knew I wanted to do something in business, and I knew I wanted to do something. Now, of course, you know this. I know this now. All business has activity, but you only know what you know. And I always kind of like that element of danger and maybe you want to call it peril. And the ER had acclimated me to that. The Army had acclimated me to that. And I was like, if you can put that in an envelope of this big business, well, maybe that's a great thing.
Okay.
And so I'm like, let's jump in. So I get going over there. I actually meet my wife, 28 years now. the first day of transfer orientation at college, and we're both in the healthcare administration program. And about a semester into that, these two PhDs come in, these older ladies, and they said, we have an entirely new program. It's called long-term care administration. There's an extreme deficiency in nursing home administrators in the state of Texas, really nationwide. And of course, they're pitching it to people in our major.
Mm-hmm.
And they said what makes it attractive is you can complete your degree requirements, do a year-long internship, and whereas you'll probably, under healthcare administration, have to go get a master's degree and then toil away in obscurity and maybe run a department in 10 years at a hospital. If you can sit for licensure and pass it, you're it. You run an entire nursing home. So I think you're already guessing what I decided to do, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I said, I don't like being an Indian.
Yeah.
I wanted to be the chief.
Right.
And by then, I think I had honed in, and I wanted to be the chief. And so I did that. I completed that, did a year-long internship the whole time, even though the Army was paying for tuition, books, fees. Obviously, there wasn't enough for housing there, which is kind of a disgrace. Should it be capped and all that? But it should, especially with what all these guys have gone through the last 20-something years.
Yeah.
I mean, it was done after World War II, much more comprehensive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what kind of got us going in an upward trajectory. But still worked 3 jobs. By then I knew, I had proposed to Roxanne a year and a half into dating. We said we'd finish school and get married. I knew she wanted 500 people at her wedding. I knew she wanted a rehearsal dinner in Mexico. I know we had to have a honeymoon and we had to have a reception in another town. So I was behind the 8 ball, dude. I needed to make some money. And so, yeah, I finished that, did the internship all the while working, finished college in 3 years. And then took another job up until right after we got married, until I could sit for licensure. So went up to Austin, sat for licensure, passed it the first time, and then gave my notice at the city of Harlingen, in South Texas. They were foolish enough to hire me with no experience, so I sold them on that job. No rural or urban planning experience, that I wanted to be the city planner for that city. And they hired me, and I did it. And so Home Depot's still mad at me because they said they wanted to come in on a corner. And I said, you ain't coming in here unless you do this, this, and this. And I built a sidewalk at their expense to perpetuity. But you know what? As luck would have it, many businesses tied into those sidewalks. And but I made them spend a boatload of money, and a lot of other businesses too. Hey, you know what's crazy, Mike? I had no idea what I was doing. Mm-hmm. I just went by the ordinances that were in front of me, these subdivision ordinances and these plats. And the commissioners and the county commissioners, if they were in good with these people, they'd let a lot of things slide. You could have a circus come into town, and we may need the availability for 500 people to park. Mm-hmm. Well, if they could squeeze them in and then block every arterial street with all that overflow, and you couldn't get them in there, they didn't give up, what. And so I said, if you hired me, I should be able to interpret these things exactly as they're written. And boy, was that hell. And then it's a good thing I passed licensure, because my city manager comes in there one day and says to me, you know what, Eric, now granted, it's a very low paying job. And if you demonstrate some initiative, you can do as much as you want. And I was young and vibrant, and I'm like, I'm going to do every damn thing I can. I learned a ton. Mm-hmm. And he comes to me one day and he's like, this may not be the job for you. I'm like, really? And he's like, so, I mean, if you don't kind of shore things up based on what I was telling you, you may not be here anymore. I'm like, do me an effing favor. I mean, you don't think I can? Okay. And then you look at it, what happened immediately after. I get this call from Guillermo Chapa. Think about how important this is now, Mike, because you're a border state. Census 2000's coming into play. And the remuneration of people, meaning they have to be counted accurately so that federal resources can be expended appropriately, correct?
Yeah.
And so this dude comes down from Washington, D.C., Guillermo Chapa, and we become like this. And we didn't just do it in the city of Harlingen or Cameron County because we were so zealous and he was from there. It meant something to him. We broke down that whole South Texas, what they call the Rio Grande Valley. They ended up giving me a crazy award for doing it. And whether you were legal, illegal, Colonia, you were living in a shed behind a house there on the back alley, I counted you. If I could find you, I counted you. And so my city manager kind of became my bud up until when I left and left me alone.
Wow. So you leave.
Yep.
Where do you go from there? So you sit for licensing. I assume you passed your license test.
I did. First facility that I ran, I was the assistant administrator of what we would call way back then a continuum care village. It's probably big in California now. So they had a what you would call a traditional with that level of acuity or people, let's just say that diminished in their activities of daily living, and it gets Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement, a skilled nursing facility. They had that. Around the campus, they also had an assisted living facility, right, where people just need to be cued and this. And then around that, they had this ring of independent homes where people just wanted to have community, but they were older.
Yeah.
And it was a real, other than the skilled nursing facility, the other components were a very highfalutin private pay deal. And they had an administrator there for 35 years. It was this lawyer, this lady out of New York. And so she hired me to be her assistant administrator because she was kind of going to purportedly retire according to their board, but she really didn't want to go. And so get in there, do that for a little bit. And but then I got an opportunity to run my own home. And by then I was like, this lady's not going to give me really the authority to do what I really need to do. I mean, she was tight in there. And I think she stayed there up until when she died, like 7 years after I left.
Wow.
But I got the opportunity to be the administrator, run my first facility in Houston. And so moved from the Valley there to run that one.
So you run your first facility.
Yep, run that one. Man, I thought I would be in, if you want to call it gerontology, for like my business career. And I'll tell you another thing. When I was in college, I ended up being a research assistant for this guy, Dr. Romaldo Z. Juarez. So obviously a Hispanic guy who's from Mexico. And he was what we call an ethnogerontologist. So the study of like minority elderly, his focus was on the Hispanic elderly. So we hit it off. He makes me his research assistant. And we compile at that time the most comprehensive bibliography of the Hispanic elderly, just in resources, where someone could have a one-stop shop to find everything they need.
This is at Southwestern Texas State?
Yeah, I forgot about that gig, which kind of, so obviously, and I had done an internship at a nursing home in order to get licensure conferred. But one of the quick things I realized is you have all these residents, many of them, I'm talking in really bad shape. I'm putting this real simple. This isn't a show on acuity or healthcare.
Right.
But then you have people that a lot of times, older women, younger women, they're not the most stout or strong. You know how hard it is for them? Let's say someone needs to be repositioned, moved, or heaven forbid, has a bed sore, pressure sore, ulcer, whatever you want to call it, and they have to move this 300-pound person. How do they do it? And so I'm like, you know what? While I'm doing this internship, I'll become a certified nurse's aide too. And what did that do? Hey, if you needed help in whatever capacity, cleaning, feeding, transferring, because I'm a young guy, I'm a strong guy, I'm gonna be all about it. So fast forward to when you end up running a facility and you're an administrator and you can still do those things. It's no different than being in the military or leading from the front in your corporate environment. Typically, the people that you're supposed to lead will follow you if they've seen that whatever you're asking them to do, you've already done how many times.
Yeah.
And you're not adverse to doing it. So what did I learn? That a lot of these people, have no family. They're on their own. Unless you have some really keen leadership, which I tried to apply there because they paid me a boatload at that time to go run that first facility.
Yeah.
And it was a big for-profit chain that owned like 130 of those homes. But the process whereby if you were going to get the state via Medicaid to pay for it and you had to spend down resources and essentially become destitute, then the home would only be paid this much. It just taught me about the kind of the reimbursement dilemmas, I'll call them damn scams, and how can you adequately ensure a quality of care unless you have a staff and you can get those people in there that have that mindset and are willing to go above and beyond to service these people whose needs are so great. And it's really tough. And so what I would simply do to make money in a home, I realized that under Medicare, if I could skill these residents, meaning I could adequately assess them. So I was like this with my director of nurses, who I hired. I got rid of the corporate deal and I didn't like her. I wanted my own person. And brought her in from the Texas Medical Center, and we would do this comprehensive evaluation. I would skill them in 2 or 3 modalities. I'd get them into.
We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.